following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
This morning we welcome a very special guest who has been a part of New York's fabric for the last 6 years, representing the spiritual and civic community in the Archdiocese that contains over 2.5 million Catholics. Cardinal Dolan has really done a tremendous job of reaching out to all New Yorkers, as you can attest as he walked around the room this morning. His personality is amazing. He was born and raised in Missouri, and he is a Cardinal fan. We won't hold that against him, but was ordained a priest nearly 40 years ago in 1976. Cardinal Dolan spent time in St. Louis, Washington, D.C., Rome, and New York, and other cities serving as a pastor, as an educator. In 2009, Cardinal Dolan received his Millennium, a symbol of his office as an Archbishop, and His Holiness Pope Benedict XVI at St. Peter's Basilica, and shortly after, in 2010, was elected President of the United States Conference of Cardinal Bishops. In 2012, also, Cardinal Dolan was appointed to the College of Cardinals and participated in the conclave that elected Pope Francis in March of 2013. Close to home, here in New York, Cardinal Dolan has been actively involved in many of the issues that affect our daily lives and of businesses, including advocating for the poor and underserved New Yorkers and school children, creating educational partnerships between major universities in the Archdiocese, and negotiating and working on the sales of air rights for historic landmarks throughout the city, obviously including St. Patrick's. Cardinal Dolan, it is clear that you are an important part of our great city, and we are thrilled that you are here with us today, and we are looking forward to hearing about your vision and priorities for New York City. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Eminence, Timothy Cardinal Dolan.
Thank you, Bill. It's a good introduction. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bill, not to contradict you, but I'm the one who's grateful. I'm the one who's honored to be here. It does my heart good to think that I'm making history and to have the first Cardinal Archbishop of New York to speak to such a distinguished organization as the Association for a Better New York. So hear me out. It's a joy, it's an honor, it's a delight to be with you this morning. As I look around this room, my heart is filled with admiration. I recognize a lot of people with whom I've already worked as I begin my 7th year as Archbishop of New York. Believe me, I thank you, and I'm honored to be in your company, and it inspires me to be here. It took me 3 years to be named a cardinal. It took me 6 years to get this pin from the Association for Better New York, but I will cherish it all the more. Now, I don't know, this is just anecdotal, but I feel at home because I get the impression there are quite a few Catholics in the room. Now, that's only anecdotal. The only reason I know that, I can see the number of people that order Bloody Marys, and I figure we have a pretty good representation of Catholics. But let me say to all on this splendid spring morning, Easter blessings and Passover blessings to all of you. This is a season of hope and promise and renewal, new birth. Spring is that all the time as our hopes and our promises are revived. And I don't know of a group that keeps that hope and promise alive more than you all in the Association for a Better New York. You believe me that I'm particularly privileged to be in the company of firefighter Shepherd. A lot of us want to live for New York. There are few that are willing to die for New York, and firefighter Shepherd represents those men and women in our police force, of our firefighters and our rescue workers that are able to do that. So, Commissioner to you and your finest, represented today by Firefighter Shepard. Thank you very much, and our love and gratitude for all that you do. Now, here goes. Of all the many reasons that I wanted to come today, to be in such esteemed company, probably what drove me most was to accept the invitation because it came from Bill Rudin. And I don't know about you, but I have an amazing amount of respect for Bill and the position that he and his family hold in this community. So, Bill, the fact that you have a position of leadership here, that you invited me, that's probably the main reason I came. So thank you, Bill, for everything you do. Bill represents to me what I cherish in the New York experience, namely the remarkable interreligious cooperation that we have. In these days, wouldn't you agree that we can't open the newspapers or turn on the radio or watch TV without hearing that religions somewhere else are literally at each other's throats? To think that we here in New York relish one another's company and work together for the noble goals that make this city great. New York is an icon of the American dream, of religions living together in harmony, not just together, but cooperating with a passion for the world that we believe God has given us to care for. To be here as a church leader makes sense. You know, in our Catholic theology, even though the church is not of the world, the church is in the world. And we take that being in the world very seriously. For us, a sign of our fidelity to God, a sign of our love for God, is a sign of our love for is the fact of our love for brothers and sisters. So that you would be united in making New York better, that you'd consider us, the Catholic family of the Archdiocese of New York, partners in that extraordinarily noble endeavor. Hallelujah. Thank you for doing that. And we rise to that challenge, and we're very grateful that you consider us to be partners. There were so many things that I thought I could speak to you about, but Bill recommended a couple that I think I will dwell on. These are more practical challenges and priorities that we have in the Archdiocese of New York, which I think you will agree are also your priorities, and which I think you will agree, these three features that I want to speak briefly about, are very much a part of making New York a better place. So what I'd like to speak to you about would be our parish planning, our schools, and our cathedral. Number one, our strategic pastoral planning. We have a challenge in the Archdiocese of New York in that, simply put, we have way too many parishes. You know what a parish is. A parish is the basic structure in Catholic life. Every Catholic belongs to a parish, traditionally the one in which they live, but these days, more often than not, people might choose a parish to which they go. Who cares? Every Catholic belongs to a parish, and every Catholic is proud of his or her parish. Their parish would be their spiritual home. It would be where their memories are, and God willing, it would be where their dreams are as well. Now, we got too many of them. We got 385. And like you in business, we got to keep up with the people. We got to move and plan with the people. And we have a parish structure that more or less is predicated on the demographics of the 1930s. Now, you would know, since so many of you are in the enterprise of serving people, meeting people's needs, that if you don't keep up with the people, if you don't move to be where they're at, sooner or later, you're going to become sluggish, and sooner or later, you're going to go out of business. So what we have now are too many half-full parishes that are falling down, and not enough parishes in the areas of New York to where our people have moved. So that means we need to do some shrewd parish planning. In the old days, folks, we've been doing parish planning for a long time. In the old days, a bishop would just say, yeah, these are the parishes I want to close, send them a letter, and it's done. We can't do that anymore. We don't want to do that anymore. We have to consult. We have to listen. We have to dialogue. So pretty much for the past 5 years, we've had a rather intense process of listening to our people. Very interesting. The first thing we asked them in this parish planning was not, should your parish stay open or closed? No. We asked them, speak to us about what the church needs to be doing. Speak to us about what the church does well and you want it to do better. speak about what the church doesn't do very well, and you'd like them to improve, and speak to us about issues where the church should be involved and they're not. And for about a year, we listened to people. About 60,000 people showed up at these town meetings throughout the Archdiocese. By the way, you know the Archdiocese of New York is only the 3 boroughs, Staten Island, Manhattan, and Bronx, and then we go up pretty close to Albany. Brooklyn, the Brooklyn diocese is Queens and Brooklyn, all right? So we only have 3 of the 5 boroughs. But we went all over listening to our people, and they gave us a huge amount of priorities that they wanted us to become more vigorous about. That could be another talk, what those priorities were. What became very obvious to us is that we were unable to respond to those issues and those priorities if we continued to be weighed down in maintaining a parish structure that was no longer serving the people. You know yourself, you walk these beloved streets, you drive by, and you would know that in a 4 to 5 to 6 block radius, you've got 2 or 3 parishes. Most of those are in disrepair. Most of those are not filled on Sunday. So we tried our best to listen. We got professionals to help us. And what we came back with was a plan where about 1/3 of the parishes would be affected, and many of those would merge into a new structure. And in some cases, one of the buildings that is merging would no longer be in service. Now that's painful, folks. That's difficult, because now we've got some parishes that as of August 1st, they won't be the spiritual home for our people anymore. And that hurts them. And so there's a lot of tears, there's some confusion, and yep, there's some anger. But in general, it's working well. And what this will do for us, leaders of New York, is allow us to, in a much shrewder way, to use the priests, the sisters, our trained lay professionals, our buildings, and yes, our finances, in a much better way. Instead of putting roofs and replacing boilers on parishes that no longer serve our people, to unleash more energy so that we can be about making New York a better place. Stay tuned. It's controversial, it's sad, but yet I hope a year from now people will look back and say that had to be done, or else the parish structure of the Archdiocese of New York, which is supposed to unleash energy of people, would have continued to absorb and distract our energies, simply maintaining what we have instead of casting out to the deep, as Jesus asked us to do, in serving God's people in New York better, and in helping us make a better New York, and in helping us prepare for a better life after this. So there's number 1, our strategic pastoral planning that we call making all things new. Number 2, our schools. Now, once again, I get the impression I'm looking out at an audience with admiration that needs no convincing about the pivotal role of education in this New York area. This is an extraordinarily hot issue, is it not? The education of our children. I'm so happy to see some representatives from our Catholic higher education, some of our Catholic higher education institutions who are here today. I mentioned to you, everybody, how planning is so, and stewarding the resources that we have is so essential to us in our parishes. That was point number 1. It also has been in our schools. And here we've got, everybody, a bit of a paradigm of how this planning and working together can help us and can even improve the quality of our product. Look, I don't think I have to defend the role of the church in education to this group. We have some representatives from our state capitol here today. A couple years ago when I testified on behalf of our schools up at the state capitol, one of them said to me, Cardinal Dolan, you don't have to defend yourself. You all, when it comes to education, you do twice as good a job at half the money than anybody else. So everybody knows, even our enemies, and Lord knows, unfortunately, we have them, everybody admits that Catholic schools work extraordinarily well. Not that we're free from problems. You bet we got our challenges, you got our difficulties. But in general, history and the present shows that we do an extraordinarily good job. Once again, about 4 years ago, remember I'm starting my 7th year, So it had come to my attention that we were in big problems because, once again, we had too many schools. We had too many half-full schools that were barely making it. And so, once again, we undertook a study that we called Pathways to Excellence to choose the best facilities, the best principals, the best faculties, all right? And we would merge them together, making sure that every corner of this vast archdiocese, which again, as you know, goes up to the Albany border, every corner of this vast archdiocese would have at least a Catholic school available for parents that wanted to send their children there. You know the stats, and here I include the Diocese of Brooklyn. So in the 5 boroughs of New York, we serve 175,000 young people in grade schools, high schools, and colleges. That's just in the 5 boroughs. That's not talking about the rest of the state. But even with that large number, everybody, and even with that quality being renowned, we were in trouble because we had too many. So we had to make a decision to what we call regionalized. Now, we had to make a tough call because those of you who are Catholics know this. The genius of our Catholic schools would be local control. You can't get anything much more homegrown than a parish school. Our schools were parish-based. That means we counted upon the parish, the pastor and the principal and the people to maintain their school. We had to grit our teeth and make a tough decision. What everybody else is doing is that we can't do that anymore. Education is way too complex and way too expensive for us to expect one parish, one pastor and one principal, and one group of people to finance their own school. We thought, as in most things, as we find about here in New York on a morning like this, when we come together, we can do things better. So once again, after a lot of consultation, what we did is merge our schools. Now that meant, over the course of 3 years, 59 of them closed. But we still have 161 grade schools, all right, that are stronger, fuller, more financially solvent, with the best faculties and principals in buildings that are sparkling, all right? Our enrollment has leveled off. It was dropping for a while, and our finances have leveled off. Now, we also made a philosophical decision, everybody, in that we thought, once again, the old days of a pastor and a principal, usually a nun, God bless them, did they ever do a great job, running the schools were over. And now we've got professional boards that run our schools. You bet the priests are still a big part of it. You bet the sisters and the teachers and the principals are still a big part of it. But we got parents, we got professionals like you, we got development people, we got fundraisers, we got scholars and academics, all who come together on these boards to make sure that our regional schools maintain their excellence. And in general, everybody, it's working. And I wanted to give that report card to you because I know you're very concerned about education. And that's number 2, our schools. And finally, everybody, can I talk a minute about our beloved cathedral? Because I think you all would agree with me, you who are passionate about making a better New York. I think you'd agree with me that there's something transcendent in the New York experience. There's something that can't be charted by the Dow Jones average or by addresses or by real estate markets or by population trends or demographics. There's something that kind of is, well, beyond us. It's a little touch of the beyond. Let me use that word, transcendent. And is there a building in town that better represents that than St. Patrick's Cathedral? It's smack dab in the middle of Manhattan, is it not? And simply put, everybody, St. Patrick's Cathedral is falling down. It's to the credit, immense credit, among the many credits that he has, that the Lord knows now and that he knows the Lord knows, Cardinal Edward Egan, my lamented predecessor. It's to his credit that he began in the latter years of his term to devise a plan for the complete repair and restoration of our beloved St. Patrick's Cathedral. When I met him 7 years ago, and when he knew I was to be a successor, he apologized, and then he said, one of the things you're going to have to do, and I could only start on it, was the repair and restoration of St. Patrick's, but it's got to be done. We're not talking about luxury. We're not talking about just kind of putting luster to a great work of art. You bet it's a great work of art. You bet we're restoring some of the luster. We're talking about repair, because literally the stones were falling, and literally our insurance people were saying, if you don't do some repair, we may have to close it. So here we are with St. Patrick's, which I hope you will agree is an icon of both that religious amity and cooperation that I spoke about earlier, that so characterizes the New York we love, and also this sense of the beyond and the transcendent that you and I, who are proud New Yorkers, know is a tangible part of our experience here in New York. Does any building represent that more than St. Patrick's Cathedral? And folks, we're moving along. We are ahead of schedule, we are behind cost, and it should be all done by the end of September. When you think having a cardinal here breaks history, what about Bill inviting Pope Francis to speak to the ABNY when he comes at the end of September, when the Holy Father, when Pope Francis comes at the end of September, September 24th and 25th to be exact, the first place he's going to visit is St. Patrick's Cathedral, and as he's going to drive up to it, I hope he's going to say, like more and more New Yorkers are saying, wow, when he sees the splendor and the radiance of this magnificent structure. Now, St. Patrick's Cathedral belongs to all of us, all of us. I call it America's parish church. Pope Benedict called it perhaps one of the most famous churches in the world. I got to tell you two stories that drive home, I think, how important St. Patrick's is. When I got here, I was only here a couple of weeks ago, back in April of 2009, when a great group of rabbis and ministers hosted a breakfast for me to welcome me. There it is again, that great spirit of ecumenical and interfaith cooperation that we have. And at the end of the breakfast, the pastor of Christ Church Methodist on Park Avenue, you know where it's at? Christ Church Methodist on Park Avenue. He stood up and he said, I was Archbishop at the time, said, Archbishop Dolan, I have a bone to pick with you. And I thought, uh-oh, what's this about? He said, a couple of weeks ago, I had a potential benefactor come up from Philadelphia to give me $1 million. And when he got off at Penn Station, he told the cabbie to take him to Christ Church. And the cabbie took him to St. Patrick's. Now, the potential benefactor knew it, and he said, cabbie, this isn't Christ Church. This is St. Patrick's Cathedral. I told you to take me to Christ Church. And the cabbie said, listen, Buster, I don't know much about religion. All I know is here in New York, this is where Christ lives. Now, we've now got a statue of that cabbie in St. Patrick's. Obviously, the pastor, my friend of Christ Church Methodist, smiled because he knew what we all know, that most people associate, when you say a church in New York, they think of St. Patrick's. We're at $100 million. It's a $170 million project, everybody, and we're at $100 million in our fundraising. And there's my second story. We couldn't be that far were it not for non-Catholic benefactors who have been extraordinarily good to us. These are business people, these are merchants, these are leaders with immense civic pride who simply realize what St. Patrick's means to greater New York and who want it to flourish in full radiance. And if I could share with you a story of one of them, a prominent Jewish man who came to see me, and I was going to ask him for a gift because his philanthropy was renowned. And he said to me, you know, Cardinal Dolan, when I was a boy growing up, after temple on Saturday morning, we would walk down Fifth Avenue. And my mom and dad, we'd walk by St. Patrick's. And they said to me, this is where the Catholics come. But we're welcome there too. And they would take me in, and we'd walk around. And my mother would always light a candle. And he looked at me and he said, but I don't think she ever paid for them. So he said, here, and he gave me a check for $5 million. I didn't have the heart to tell him that with interest it might be up, but I simply mention that to you, everybody, to I think, as an example, as an exhibit of the good spirit, the friendship and interreligious dialogue that this brings out. Those are the 3 points. I appreciate the time. I'm grateful for your interest. Most of all, I renew my sense of honor and privilege in being with such an esteemed group. I hope you'll invite me back, because I'd love to come, okay? God bless. All right?
Cardinal, thank you very much. Cardinal has agreed to answer a few questions from the audience.
I wondered, understanding that as Catholics, how much we value each human life, how do you feel almost weekly now when you view the television and you see these unfortunate people being shot down across America?
George, thanks for bringing it up. As I mentioned, the tender question that George poses was one of the topics I thought about addressing you on, only because New York has always been known to be a conscience and a heart in protecting what we cherish. And one of the things we cherish would be our religious freedom and the sense of respect that we have for one another's religion. And when we see that violated today in such graphic and violent ways, it tears at our heart. So, George, I didn't speak on that as much as I would have liked to, so I'm glad you mentioned it. We're in a terribly vicious new era of religious persecution, are we not? And you all know that, and we should not be afraid to unmask that. And a couple points come to mind. First of all, we cannot allow religion to be perceived as a force of hatred, division, and violence in the world. As my boss, Pope Francis, says over and over again, religion is intended by the Creator as a source of love and unity and enlightenment and raising people up and serving them and loving them, never hating them or killing them. And anytime someone would use religion contrary to that, that's not religion at all. That's a perversion of religion. So there's number one, because it can be embarrassing sometimes for people like Faith, like many of us are in this room, to see people so abuse and pervert the true meaning of religion. Secondly, I think while we have to be blunt in saying that Islamic fanaticism could be at the core, is at the core of so much of this, we know that, they identify themselves as such, we also have to be very open to say that they are not, again quoting Pope Francis, true representatives of the Islamic faith. It would be good, and we need to encourage true Islamic leaders to speak up, to remind the world of that fact. I know that's difficult for them because they too live under terror sometimes. But we're seeing that more and more happen. You probably saw the excellent article in the Wall Street Journal on Friday by an Islamic scholar in Egypt who spoke about precisely this point. So God can bring good out of evil. One of the goods that are coming about would be that moderate, temperate, genuine Islamic leaders are gradually rising up to remind the world that these fanatics do not represent them. Thirdly, we have to speak more loudly about this. Now, once again, I want to give a nod. You know who's telling me that we Christians ought to be more vocal? But my Jewish friends. I had Ron Lauder. Would you know Ron, who's head of, is it the World Jewish Congress? Yes. Ron came to see me for 2 hours a week or so ago, and he said, "What's taking you Christians so long? We Jews learn the hard way. If you wait around and think this is going away, it's only going to get worse. And you better come together, and you better organize, and you better begin to lobby on behalf of your co-religionists in the world who are now literally putting their life on the line when they go to church on Sundays." To his credit, he offered to help us. But we need to become much more vocal. We need to become much more organized, George, and stay with me because we've got some movement in that regard. We can't let those people alone. When you think of it, I was just on the phone the other day with a good friend of mine, the Archbishop of Jos in Nigeria, where Boko Haram, where they just butchered 153 students, young students on a college campus simply because they were Christian, because they couldn't say an Islamic prayer. They were shot in the back of the head. We can't remain silent on that. There is a systematic, organized, well-funded, well-strategized strategy of persecution of religious minorities in the world, mostly Christian, and we can't stand by mute. So, George, thank you for letting me say that.
Cardinal, thank you very much for being here. It was insightful.
Thank you.